This week we're talking about the literature review. The goals for this lecture are to locate when to conduct a literature review in your research process, to understand the purpose of the literature review, and to attain the skills for writing a literature review. Within your research paper and process, the literature review comes after you've posed your problem statement and your research questions. In this sort of formal outline of the process, the review of the literature happens after you've defined the problem or selected a topic for your research. And this happens also during the informal process. So you have an idea of the topic that you want to research, but you need to know more about it to refine that topic. Within the scientific method, this happens after you ask a question and you want to research existing sources that have already navigated that question. In the IMLS narrative, or our final project for this class, this is located under the Statement of Need. The IMLS narrative says, research proposals should clearly explain how the proposed research will address current issues in the research literature and how the findings can be used to improve the services of libraries and archives. So the purpose of the literature review is to get a snapshot of the literature that is directly relevant to the project that you've conceptualized. The literature review is a section of your paper or your article that will familiarize the readers of your paper with critical terms and findings that contextualize your research questions. This provides your readers with what they need to know going forward in your study. The literature review is also a conversation that you're having with other academics. So your literature review locates you within this academic conversation around your topic. Your literature review is not covering everything that's ever been written about your topic. It is not a justification for your methods, and it's not an indexed or just a list of interesting articles or bibliography. So I want to cover 6 steps on writing a literature review. Step 1, you're going to decide on your areas of research. Step 2, you'll search for the literature. Step 3, you want to read with focus. Step 4, you're going to code your literature. Step 5, you'll create a conceptual schema. And step 6, you'll write it out. First off, you're deciding your areas of research. We discussed this last week when we talked about defining or deciding your topic or the problem that you're trying to research or understand. So you're defining the areas that you'll be studying. Before you begin to search for articles or books, you have to decide beforehand what areas you're going to research. You want to make sure that you only get articles and books in that area, even if you come across interesting books in other areas. During this process, you'll want to conceptualize the categories of your literature review. So what are the major areas of literature that you're going to be including in your review? This is useful in limiting the topics and paths that you could take. One way to do this is to review your research question or the question formulating around a problem that you're looking at to look for specific categories that you'll be researching. What are some of the categories that you can grab from your research question? So here's an example of a research question. How do high school students use social media to share their reading practices? What categories can we grab from this question? We want to know about high school students or young adult reading practices, contemporary, so we want to look to up-to-date literature. We want to know what's out there and already written about young adult reading practices. We want to know what's written about youth or the specific age group, and social media. And we want to look at youth and information technology literacy. These are 3 different categories that we've identified, and we can now go forward and research them further. Next, you want to search for this literature. So gather the literature. You want to conduct a comprehensive bibliographic search of books and articles in your area. Only read the abstracts online and download and print or download and save those articles that only pertain to your research. Find books that in the library or online that are relevant and check them out. Don't use anything outside of the few areas or categories that you've identified. So some ways that you might research this are through library databases. Your URI account is very helpful. You have access to a number of databases through the URI libraries. You can, of course, sit down with a librarian and set up a reference interview, and they can help you navigate the different categories that you've selected. Once you find very relevant articles, skim down to their works cited or bibliography and look through those articles and look and find if there's any articles very specific to your topic. And finally, use the related articles or find similar results function on the URI Library's database. So this is usually in the left-hand side of the screen when you find a related article. So I found an article on exploring the experiences of upper elementary school children who are intrinsically motivated to seek information. This is a little bit off from my research categories, so I probably would not use it, but I can find similar results and see what's generated from there. So you've done a thorough search for your literature, and you've come up with a list and downloaded and printed or downloaded your articles and collected a good number of articles that are specifically relevant to your topic. Now you want to read with focus. We talked about this for reading in the lecture Reading for Grad School. But during this process, you really want to look for, you want to narrow in, you want to look through an article or a chapter of a book or the other resource for the following. And you want to mark these sections in the book or type them up in a Word document. So you want to look for you want to skim these books and articles because you're going to be skimming a lot of data. Look first for claims, conclusions, and findings about the constructs you are investigating, and write those out, type those out. Look for a definition of terms, and type those out. Look for the calls for follow-up studies relevant to your project. Usually that's at the end of an article. Look for gaps that you notice in the literature and type those out. So what was missing? What gaps might you fill with your study? And look for your personal disagreements about the constructs that you are investigating. So how do you disagree with the conclusions that chapter or article come to? Or how do you disagree with maybe how they approach the subject? When you find any of these 5 things, type the relevant excerpt from the article or chapter directly into your document. Don't summarize, because that takes longer than just typing it up. Make sure to note the name of the author and the page number following the passage, and do this for each article and book that you have in your stack of literature. When you're done, you can print out the document or just keep it all in one Word document. And you should have a rather large, similar to an annotated bibliography, but with these specific things in mind. Next, you're going to code your literature. So there's two ways to do this. You can either do it on your laptop, or you can actually print up everything that you typed out after you did your reading, your intentional reading, and you're going to print and cut and paste. So you could get out of a pair of scissors and cut each of your notes apart. This means each sort of annotated bibliography you're going to cut into its own section. Now sort those pieces of paper into similar topics. So you have different summaries of articles, and you're going to start noticing that some of them might overlap according to topic. Make sure that each note goes into a pile, and if there are excerpts that you can't figure out where they belong, separate those and go over them again at the end to see if you can find new categories. When you finish, place each stack of notes into an envelope or a stack and label them with the name of a theme. So you've gathered a lot of literature on these categories that you used for your literature review, and this is basically the process of coding your literature. You've read through the passages quickly, and you're not reading for deep meaning, but you pretty much skimmed and you looked for the ideas relevant to the categories for your lit review. You're not reading everything, of course, you read with focus. So now you have these stacks of annotations, and you have stacked them into themes that you've noticed. And this is really where your instinct comes in. How do you see themes happening? Once you label each stack, you're going to have pretty much a conceptual schema. So here's an example of a conceptual schema. If I had stacks that one stack represented definitions of privilege, and one stack represented privilege determined by group membership, and one represented privilege determined by social construction, I'm going to start to notice how these themes go together. They might have subtopics, and you're just going to outline this into a conceptual schema. You can also organize this through your Word document, but if you're a very visual person, it really helps to print that out, cut it out, arrange it in stacks, and then see which themes come out of those stacks. This conceptual schema, once you've labeled them and labeled your themes and sort of created an outline out of your themes, this is officially your original research. You've now started to build a literature review out of the trends and patterns that you see happening. So here's another outline to creating the conceptual schema. To create your conceptual schema, you go to your computer, or you can write it out and type out the name of each of your coded themes. So these are each of your coded themes, and you're going to type them out into an outline format. And figure out the best way to organize those themes. So how does it make the most sense? So my original question that I was working with, how do high school students use social media to share reading practices? I might have started with young adult reading practices, and then I saw a sub-theme of information technologies, and another sub-theme of genres. And then under my youth and social media, I found that there was communal reading habits, and that young people were recommending to each other readings and different genres through social media. And then I found another theme happening, youth and information technology literacy. The themes were about platforms and hardware is used. So now I have an outline that my literature review is going to follow. And that's according to this schema and these annotations that I created. Here's an example of a schema for literature review. Sort of more of an overview. So you have your research question. The question in this example, What are the factors that influence the self-management behaviors of elderly HIV-infected African Americans with other health conditions? And you might have a quick background that whatever you have already done, whatever research you've done, and then you have the search strategies. So how did you search for related literature? And then you have the categories that came up for the literature review: the demographic factors, age and gender, the identity factors, cognitive skills, different subcategories that go under that, and then a final sort of theme, relational factors. So this is just an example of how this person might outline their literature review for the conceptual schema. After you have your conceptual schema and really an outline, you're going to just go through and write it out quickly. So you already have all your annotations from that literature review, and now you have a schema that you're going to follow. So you can choose any section of your conceptual schema to begin with. You can begin anywhere. Figure out the schema based on the themes and how you want them organized. And then you'll just go through and write up the literature. So you'll organize the literature summaries and quotes according to your schema. You'll arrange the excerpts from your annotations about the topics so that they make arguments you want to make about what the literature says. And you'll organize your literature review by major topics, not chronologically. This is important because the instinct might be to arrange these topics chronologically, but really you're going and organizing it in the way that makes the most sense to you. Write that out and pretty much throw those annotations together. And then after you've written everything out, add your introductions, your overviews, your transition statements, and your overall argument. Once you've completed these 6 steps, you'll have a complete draft of your lit review. This process breaks the lit review down into manageable steps for something that seems very large. Some final tips: look through dissertations or thesis or articles to become familiar with the format of a literature review. Some resources to help you further is the blog Get a Life PhD, 6 Steps to Writing a Literature Review, Chapter 5 in Destination Dissertation, Week 5 in Writing Your Journal Article in 12 Weeks, and Creswell talks about the literature review in Chapter 2, and Babby talks about the literature review in Chapter 17. One way that you can start to apply this is to develop a literature map of the studies on your topic. So as you're starting to think about your topic, you want to break it down into smaller themes to proceed with your research. So my research coming up that I'm looking into is I want to research Latina migrant information technology practices in Southern California. So I want to first look at the literature written on Latina information technology uses and practices. I want to look at Latina migrant histories in Southern California to sort of know the overall history and what's been written about Latina migrants. And then I want to look at Latina migrant experiences in the library because ultimately I'm trying to speak to a need in the library. So try this out, break down your topic and see what 3 themes come up, and then proceed with researching those themes and starting to build your literature review.